So we're here with Elisabeth Sabaditsch-Wolff, and she is an Austrian human rights activist, and she is a critic of Sharia law and Islamism. She actually grew up as the daughter of a diplomat in Iran during the Iranian Revolution, and she's got a lot of experience in the Middle East, has been in contact with Islam throughout a lot of her life, and then she got into some trouble with the law in Austria after criticizing Muhammad. Elisabeth, thank you for being with us. And could you tell us a little bit about your story? How is it that you came into conflict with the authorities over the things that you had to say? I mean, in America, we're used to having like freedom of speech. We can say whatever we want, even if a Muslim or a Hindu or a Christian finds it offensive. Tell us a little bit about your story and what's different in Austria that you ended up getting in trouble.
Well, hi, Alex. Thanks for having me on your show. It's a pleasure. Well, I am what I call a diplomat's brat. I grew up in many different countries because my father was a diplomat in the Austrian Foreign Service. That also explains why my English is decent, because I grew up in New York and Chicago, went to school in Chicago. And because I went to school at an American school, I had to study the Constitution. So what I learned is the First Amendment, the Bill of Rights, the First and Second Amendments, actually, and they came to mean a lot to me. And probably my biggest mistake was to believe that I also had rights similar to those enshrined in the United States Constitution in Europe. When I started speaking out about the threat of Islam and Sharia law to Austrian and European societies in Europe back in 2008 and 2009. So I gave seminars to interested people, to the public, and then a leftist journalist surreptitiously one day infiltrated my seminars, recorded them, and sent the transcript to the public prosecutor, who then pressed charges for what first amounted to hate speech, and which was subsequently changed during the proceedings by the judge to something called denigration of religious teachings, which is in essence blasphemy law.
Wow! And so, yeah. What did they do to you as a result of this? And in fact, I remember we wrote about this whole story in the New American, and I think for Americans, it's really shocking that even in Europe, a lot of us think of Europe to be kind of similar, at least in some ways, to America. It was kind of shocking that you could get in trouble for this. So what happened to you? What did they do? And tell us a little bit about the court proceedings and how that all went. And also, what are some of the dangers of this, of silencing people who want to speak out on what they see as the dangers of something in particular?
Well, the whole court proceedings took 9 years because I decided to fight this charge all the way to a supranational court called the European Court of Human Rights. So at first, in the lower courts, I was found of denigration of religious teachings. I received a fine, which on the face looks moderate, about $540, but that's only because I have no income, thanks to my criticizing Islam. And I decided that this was a terrible signal to allow this to basically become law. Now, before we continue, you will probably wonder what it is that I said that got the court so agitated. I mean, I must have really started.
A lot of people are wondering that.
Exactly. Well, I mean, given that I was found guilty, you'd think that I said something like really, really shocking, which I did not. I asked it was a 12-hour seminar that was recorded, and so I said a lot of things, and the seminar were PowerPoint presentations, fully sourced. But of course, some topics got the people discussing, the people who attended the seminars. And one topic was the life of Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam, and how he married a 6-year-old girl named Aisha and consummated the marriage when she was 9, which, according to nowadays standards, we would call, and watch out, because I'm physically in the United States, I can say that. If I were in Europe, I wouldn't be able to say it. I'd have to sort of censor, not sort of, I would have to censor myself. But because I'm in the US and I'm protected by the First Amendment, I can say what I said, actually. I said, what do you call this behavior, i.e. marrying a 6-year-old and consummating the marriage when she's 9, if not pedophilia? So I did not say Muhammad was a pedophile. I said, what do we call this behavior if we want to be, quote unquote, politically correct? What do we call this behavior if not pedophilia? So everybody got really excited about that. You can't say that. It's terrible. It's horrible, blah, blah, blah.
And here's the interesting thing, Elizabeth. That's true, right? And that's based on the Islamic scriptures. I mean, that comes right out of the Islamic holy writings. And so you have a book with a really interesting title. I guess you can't say things even if they're true in Austria, right? So truth is not a defense. Tell us, how does that work? Because I mean, in America, we have libel laws, and if you say something that's objectively false about somebody that causes them financial harm or whatever, they can sue you. But truth is always a defense, right? You can always say, but what I said was true,
no,
and then it's okay. But it doesn't work that way in Austria.
Look, the terrible thing is, first I was found guilty on that. I then appealed, and the next level court level told me, well, it's we as a court agree it's factually true that Muhammad married a 16-year-old and consummated the marriage when she was 9, but you cannot call it pedophilia because, get this is considered an excess of opinion. I mean, just wrap your head, as an American, wrap your head around all this baloney, and that's putting it very mildly. It's just unbelievable. I said to my lawyer back then, I said, we could have had Muhammad and Aisha testify personally. It wouldn't have made no difference whatsoever. So this is something that sounds so far-fetched to you Americans. It's painful, and because I grew up in the States, it's just as painful for me. But you have to understand that in Europe, rights are not God-given, rights are granted, and if rights are granted, they can be taken away. Another point that I need to raise in this context, because you said the truth is no defense, you alluded to the title of my book. That is true, because in 2015, a couple of colleagues and friends of mine attended a conference of a supranational organization called the Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe, of which America is a founding member state and should actually leave the organization because it's useless. And at one of these
I agree.
At one of these meetings, we were told officially by the OSCE that in some instances, because the truth hurts, the truth can be considered hate speech. I mean, wrap your head around that. You have a supranational organization that says the truth is no defense, the truth can be considered hate speech. And that, sorry to interrupt, Alex, but this is important because it just explains everything. It just, all of this makes sense. You have a poll. I don't know this poll, Alex. Majority of Americans want First Amendment rewritten. 51% of millennials want fines or jail time for hate speech. Now, how did we get to this, Alex? It's because of America's participation in supranational organizations. So you need to leave places. You need to leave organizations called places like the OSCE.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. And we've only got about a minute and a half left, but I wanted to ask you about another thing now, because the Austrian government, there was recently a case that we wrote about in the New American now, the Austrian government and European supranational institutions are trying to impose these speech codes all over the world. And so, now we have in Scandinavia and in the UK, they arrest Christian preachers who criticize homosexuality. They arrest people who criticize Islam. And now you had the European Court of Justice saying that there was a case in Austria, I'm sure you've heard about it, where these people who criticized an Austrian politician, said she was a treacherous oaf and corrupt and these things, that you can't just not criticize her in Austria, that it's illegal in Austria, but now the European court ruled that Facebook must delete this all over the world. So what is the danger that these crazy speech controls are being exported from Europe even over to free nations where God-given rights are recognized?
Well, the dangers are huge. Like I just said, look at the millennials in the United States. I mean, if you here in the United States don't start fighting for your rights, and you still have those rights, and you still have, while it's hard, you still have, and I'm quoting Eric Metaxas here, you still have the freedom to fight for freedom. You need to fight for the freedoms you have. We already, in Europe, already lost our freedoms. And you said it's going to be imposed on all of the entire world. This is one world government. This is what the elites want. They are looking for the one world government, and one way to do this is to control speech. We're returning to socialism. You need to control people's minds. You need to control people's rights to free speech. And once you got that, coupled with the youth, with the young people, with the millennials, you've won. You've got the perfect dictatorship. And, it's my warning here in America, where I can still speak freely. God bless you here in America. And, you need to fight for your freedom of speech. You still have the tools in the box. You still have your First and Second Amendments, but we don't.
Elisabeth, thank you so much for being with us. Tell us where to get the book, and
Yes.
just some parting words, if you would.
So here's my book. It's called The Truth Is No Defense, and it's available on Amazon.com and Barnes & Noble. If people read it, please leave some feedback. And the book not only details my life and how I got into this quote-unquote business, but it also has expert analysis by really great people like Stephen Coughlin, Claire Lopez, Robert Spencer, and many others. So I think people will find it very, very interesting. And, thank you very much, Alex, for having me on your show.
Hey, thank you so much, Elisabeth. It was great to be with you. Good luck in the United States, and thanks, folks, for watching. God bless you all.